It's been a year since Te Whatu Ora committed to all 101 recommendations to work towards a goal of no patients waiting more than a year for planned treatment. However, a year on, only 3 of the recommendations have been completed. In some cities, the number of people waiting more than a year has improved. In Northland, there were 648, that's now 315. Bay of Plenty, 283 people were waiting for treatment, that's now 144. But bad news if you live in Canterbury, where the last year has seen an increase of 643 people waiting more than a year for treatment, and in Waikato it's 395, up from 244. Planned Care Task Force Chair Andrew Connolly joins us for more on this morning. Andrew, thanks for coming in.
Pleasure, thank you.
So 101 recommendations, 3 have been completed. Is work moving fast enough, do you believe, on those recommendations, which would take people off those waiting lists?
Yeah, look, great question. I'm a surgeon historically, so I'm naturally impatient. I wanted it all done yesterday. I know the 3 sounds terrible, but there weren't particularly many that were just do it, tick it, don't worry about it again. I think Te Whatu Ora sent through that there's significant work progressing in about 70 and there's still 20 odd to start. No, it's not fast enough, but considering I think the position the health system's been in, we are making progress. Now, that's not a lot of comfort to someone who is sitting excessively on a waiting list, but the devil is in the detail and there is progress. So the entirety of the waiting times are moving what we'd call to the left in terms of shorter times. In many areas, not all. Many specialties, not all, and I think we all know the challenges, say, of orthopaedics. And as you've said in your introduction, you know, the Canterbury is doing it really tough. The northern region, we're in a better shape. The centre of the country, again, making progress. So, we're getting there, but it's slow.
Does that concern you that it is still very much a postcode lottery? Like, if you're waiting for surgery in Canterbury, you're worse off than if you're living in Northland?
Well, I think we should all be concerned about the so-called postcode lottery. I know the guys and the team in Christchurch are doing a huge amount of work on utilising facilities in Timaru and things like this. The Canterbury experience is really a microcosm of the rest of the country, and it comes down to staffing. You know, the health workforce has taken a beating. I would just like to acknowledge the frontline clinical, all the frontline staff. They've done an amazing job. Particularly when our emergency presentations all over the country are above what we'd predict.
Yeah, you certainly wouldn't blame frontline staff for these waiting lists. By what date do you intend to have people want to get down to 0 on the number of people who've been waiting more than a year?
So the number waiting more than a year, and I think it's really important for the viewers to realise it's broadly not the same people. So the most districts, certainly in the northern half of the country, in most specialties, will have very few waiting more than a year by the end of this year. But of course, every day you advance on the waiting list and there's someone who, for instance, may have needed, I don't know, their blood pressure sorting out first and it's taken a while. So there are swings and roundabouts, but Te Whatu Ora Chief Executive, she has said that outside of orthopaedics, we should have no one waiting more than a year, broadly speaking, by the end of this year. And I think for a lot of specialties, that's realistic. If I look at my own hospital, most of our specialties will be there. There's a handful of patients in plastic surgery which require 12-hour operations, 2 or 3 surgeon teams, and the logistics. These aren't excuses, it's just reality. I think if we can restore the staff, what we are seeing is, for me, I'm seeing probably a disproportionate improvement versus the improvement in staffing. So I think we are being smarter and more efficient in many areas.
The numbers, just looking at the numbers of people who are on those lists, so actually there's no reporting in the last report for Taranaki, Mid-Central, Whanganui and Southern. So when you've set a date for the end of the year, how do you know actually if you've achieved that when we actually don't know the number of people who are on those waiting lists?
Fair question. I think and someone from head office will have to correct me, but I think the data that's been provided is always a quarter or so behind. I think they do quarterly reports. In the last probably in the last couple of months, I've become a lot more confident about the data we're now getting. So I can actually go onto a dashboard and see what's the state of, general surgical, which is my specialty, waiting list, not only in counties but in any district around the country. And I think we've got more confidence in those numbers. So when the planned care operational people at Te Whatu Ora look at this and report things through, I am confident that they're giving us a much more accurate picture of the waiting list.
All right. Planned Care Task Force Chair Andrew Connolly, really appreciate you coming in and discussing that. Thank you. It's 7:16. And to, I guess, look from an outside in, but somebody who did have some insight at one point, is former Te Whatu Ora Chair Rob Campbell joining us now. Rob, listening to Andrew there, do you think it's fair enough that actually, although only 3 of these recommendations have been completed, it doesn't necessarily mean that the work is not moving on at a pace that it should be?
Well, I think Andrew would agree that it's not moving on at the pace that anybody would like. He's still working within the system, so he possibly has to be a bit careful with his words. So it's not progressing fast enough. The issues here were well known before Andrew and his highly skilled colleagues took on this job. They knew the issues. It was a matter of organising them in a format. The failures here are the failures of the Minister and the Ministry of Health to address the critical issues of workforce and pay, which have held back realisation of these objectives. The objectives themselves were far too many. They weren't well planned. The board made it clear to management that it needed to prioritise and target more effectively than have 100 recommendations, and that has slowed things too. But generally, Andrew is quite right. The frontline staff have worked very hard on this. There are some improvements being made, but the government and the ministry have consistently underestimated how difficult all of this is, and that's what's created the problem.
Looking at overall operations or procedures that have taken place in the last year compared to the year before, and this is something that Te Whatu Ora has said they're proud of the increase. It's been a 6.4% increase, but of course this is the first year where that wouldn't have been impacted by lockdowns or alert level changes. Is 6.4% enough of an improvement to remove people from waiting more than a year?
No, it's nowhere near satisfactory, and the people at Te Whatu Ora know that, and it's important that Te Whatu Ora becomes more open about this and about what the issues are. The long-standing issues of staffing, which are to do with partly recruitment, but partly also just pay and conditions, aren't resolved quickly, and they've taken far too long. What should have been done was to pay attention to those things first, rather than a lot of the reshuffling at the top that has gone on. So we need to do a lot more of this. And for the incoming government, the issue will be to establish some priorities and to make sure that there's still a few relatively small but significant pay and conditions arguments to be sorted out. There's workforce recruitment issues to be sorted out. Unless you have the people well motivated and well organised, you can't solve these problems. So that's where the attention has to go and where the support has to go.
Just finally, Rob, I want to read some quick feedback we've had in from Val, who says, my husband has a spinal problem where he's losing the feeling in his legs. Now he uses a walking frame and has trouble walking. The fear is basically he won't be able to walk at all very soon. It was diagnosed a year ago. He received a letter saying he may be looked at in 345 days. So just within the 12 months waiting. Is there a danger here that there could be a little bit of fudging with numbers so to make it look like people aren't waiting 12 months plus, or is that just pretty bad luck for Val and her husband?
Well, that's very sad and very, very frustrating. Personally, I would doubt that there's any deliberate fudging of the numbers. There's enough problems in the system without that, but it's a dramatic illustration of how difficult the situation is.
Former Te Whatu Ora Chair Rob Campbell, thanks for your time.